Hello YouTube, this is Matt Pullin, and I would like to say thank you to my first 1,000 subscribers. Alright, some of you may have heard that I beat an international master over this past weekend in the Illinois Open. And, well, yes, that is true. So here's what happened. This is my game against Mesgen Amanov. He's a 2450 IM from Turkestan, a country which I had not heard of prior to this weekend. My rating was 2011 at the time. I was white and I opened with d4. He played knight f6 and I play my Veresov opening, knight c3. And this got him in a think on move 2, which I was thinking then this has to be good for me if I've taken him out of his favorite opening by playing my Veresov. Because this really prevents all the Indian style defenses because of white's control over e4. Black's choice here is to transpose into a king-pawn game, like the Pirtz, French, or Caro-Kann, or play d5 and play into the main Veresov lines. So my opponent played d5, and I played bishop to g5, and there are several options for black on move 3, but he chose e6. And this move allows a French defense transposition with pawn to e4. This is a classical French. But I decided no, I would follow the move order recommended by Nigel Davies in his book The Veresov, published by Everyman, and I tried this nuanced knight f3. And knight f3, the idea is to delay committing to the French for one move, make black make one more move. So, if he plays bishop b4, then I don't have to play for e4. I can play queen d3 with the idea of pushing a3 and recapturing with the queen on c3 and not the pawn if he takes. So this avoids the doubled pawns and it's going after the bishop pair. So that is an interesting possibility, but my opponent played a solid developing bishop e7, and now I exchange on f6 and I play e4, and this is sort of a curveball transposition to the French defense, something called the Anderson attack of the classical variation. So I won't go over all the options here for black. I got this position in a later game in the tournament, and my opponent in that game, another international master, Angelo Young, played c6 against me, a move I had never seen before, and I lost that game after a long struggle. But my opponent in this game played castles, and I was very happy because this transposes to the theory that I am familiar with. So here I play bishop d3. It's also possible to push e5. But I play bishop d3, and now he plays c5, and I play e5. And he could exchange on d4 with a counterattack on my knight on c3, but no, he did not play that line. He played bishop to e7, and now I play h4. And all this is theory to me. So I had spent less than a minute on my clock getting to this position, whereas my opponent had spent 15 minutes on his clock to reach this. So, yeah, I'd say my opening choice has been a success. And already this is a very dangerous position for black. If he plays pawn takes pawn on d4, then the classical bishop sacrifice, bishop takes h7 check, is strong. For if he takes this bishop, then knight g5 check, bringing the queen out to d3 or h5, depending on where the black king moves. And of course this knight can never be taken because of h takes g5, and the discovered check with the rook on the h file will mate the king very shortly. Also, if he plays f6, then it turns out that white can start a promising attack. There's this game in his Veresov book that Davies lists this move, knight to g5. I think this was played by Pillsbury, where if pawn takes pawn, then queen h5, attacking h7, and if h6, then the queen can go to g6, threatening mate in 2. So black is pretty much compelled to block with his rook on f5, and then I can then continue g4, etc. So my opponent actually played a very solid h6, and this move it does weaken the black light squares, especially if he later plays his pawn to f6. But it prevents any sort of an immediate tactical attack on black's king. So now white needs to worry about the center. If white allows pawn takes pawn, then the knight on f3 will have to take, and that will leave the pawn on e5 completely unguarded. So, instead, I want to play knight to e2 to reinforce the pawn chain with pawn to c3, but unfortunately I cannot do this because c4 and my light square bishop has no squares. So it's time to capture on c5, and he plays bishop takes, and now the correct move would be to play g4, which is the pawn storm idea. Black has created this hook on h6, and then white will advance his pawn g4, g5 to try to force black to open some lines on the king side. So yeah, this gets pretty wild. This game, Cherusek versus Maratsi in 1895, featured queen to b6, attacking the f2 pawn and the b2 pawn. And white played the defense queen d2. And the way this game should go is bishop to d7, preventing the knight a4 fork. Then white castles, bishop takes pawn, king b1. And the f2 pawn has fallen, but white has a lot of compensation for the pawn. He has a head start on his pawn storm, all his pieces are developed, and he has some open lines to attack the black king. But instead, after queen to d2, Maratsi got greedy and played bishop takes f2. And after queen takes f2, queen takes b2, the idea is black is going to regain the piece by attacking the rook on a1 and the knight on c3. But Maratsi's opponent played king to d2, and this resource defends the knight on c3 and connects the rooks. So Maratsi was just down a piece for 2 pawns here. But that was not what happened in my game. I did not find the g4 idea. Instead, I came up with this dubious novelty, a3. The objective is to play the pawns to b4 and c3, replacing my dark square bishop, which I've traded, and then remaneuver my knight to e2 and then to d4. But in practice, there's not enough time to get all these moves in, especially if black organizes an attack on e5. For instance, a good plan would be knight to c6, and then if I play queen to d2, then a6, which prevents this knight to b5 move, and also prepares a space for this bishop to retreat and maintain pressure on f2. So after a3, my opponent, Amanov, played queen b6, attacking the f2 pawn and b2 pawn. And I already thought that he might play this back when I played d takes c, so I immediately played queen d2. This is going to be my defense. So, because I played this so soon, Amanov must have thought that I had hastily played this in hoping that black would capture on b2, and that I had made a tactical error. So he looked at this move for maybe 2 minutes, maybe a minute 30 seconds, and he decided that he would try to win the house. But he should play bishop to d7, preventing either of my knight moves to b5 or a4, at which point I would have had to play rook b1 because it's way too dangerous to castle queenside when you've played pawn to a3. So instead, Amanov took on f2. And students of history know what will happen next. Queen takes, and then queen takes b2, threatening the rook and the knight, and then I played king to d2. So I have won a piece for 2 pawns, and I'm threatening to trap the queen. So Amanov retreated his queen, it's the only square possible, and then I took. So Amanov, thinking that I had made a tactical inaccuracy, but actually I'd set a trap for him, and he made the same blunder that Maratsi had made in 1895. So, I played rook to b1 here, attacking this b pawn, and I thought he would play knight to c6, putting the knight on its best square, but no, he played knight to d7, defending the pawn. And then I moved my knight in to b5, and he played rook to a5, because if he tries to break up my center with pawn to f6, then I can play knight to c7 forking. So he plays rook to a5, and then I bring my knight to d6, which is an excellent square. Because I think that, conventional chess wisdom states that if you're up material, you should try to trade pieces and not pawns. But I think that only applies when the inferior side has 0 or 1 pawns for the piece. When one side has 2 or more pawns for the piece, I think the side with more pieces needs to attack in order to take advantage of the extra piece, because in the endgame, the multiple pawns are more important. So he plays f6 now to attack my center, and I take, and for tactical reasons he has to take with pawn. And now I play rook to b4 with the rook lift. And here, he played king h8 so that rook g4 will not come with check. And I played h5 to clear up a square for my knight to come into g6. So now he played rook to c5 to prepare to surround the knight and force me to trade it for his inactive bishop. But I played knight h4, and he resigned because he's going to have to lose material. So yeah, that was my win against an international master.